I've been asked many times how the Millennium Arch came to be. My answer is that it started in 1946. I was 12 years old when my father took me to hear Winston Churchill's famous Iron Curtain speech at Westminster College in Fulton. I took a very good picture of Churchill and Truman riding in the open car. The photo lay forgotten for some 50 years until I decided to go to Fulton for the 50th anniversary of the speech. There I met 3 of Churchill's grandchildren, including Edwina Sandys. I told Edwina about the half-scale replica of a Stonehenge at Rolla and the work UMR researchers were doing with high-pressure water jets to cut through stone. She expressed interest in learning more about the process. Soon after, I made the decision to commission the sculpture.
Finding the spot or the site for a sculpture is absolutely key. The right setting is the partnership for the piece. So we were looking for a site where there'd be some pedestrian thoroughfare and would be a natural walking place for people. It's going to be a partnership between the technology and the art, with art and science. I think it's thrilling.
It's the marriage of science and art, I suppose, in that we are trying, in solving some problems that they need to create more advanced art objects, having to push the boundaries of where we know the science is today. We can cut through a foot of granite without a whole lot of problem. We're now trying to cut through 2'6". And in doing that, we at the same time expand the horizons of people like Edwina Sandys, who have these very creative ideas for making sculptures. And I think not only therefore are we learning more ourselves, but we're also liberating her to be able to think more freely in terms of the form she can make.
If you have a piece of rock and you want to just cut a circular slab out of it, in the past, working the way they would have done in Italy, in Carrara, you would just make a hole in it and then get through it, and then you would smooth around until you had your desired circle as a space within the rock. But now with this technology, very accurately, you can make a circle, go through it, and remove the circles. So in the sculpture that we're going to do here, we're going to have, in the 2 standing stones, we're going to have the figure of a man and a woman cut out, and they will stand separate, apart from the gate and from the standing stones with the void images. The technology is a very important part of this.
Look,
Right.
that is pretty stable.
It is a little bit square on the bottom, but it's almost pointed.
Let's put this on top of that just for fun.
Right. The question we have for you is, this is your chance to tell us, and it's the only chance you're going to get, whether this thickness is what you want or whether you think it's too thick, not thick enough, whatever. Because after I cut the rock, your chance is gone.
Suppose this comes right out of that.
Right.
Now you've polished it, but if you hadn't polished it, it would be the same as that.
Well, this one is exactly like that. This one comes
Nice to see it, isn't it? It gives you a bit of a little bit of a perspective on it all, the sort of the grandeur of it. This is exciting, isn't it? Now here we are, right in the mountains. You say this is our piece?
We began by going down to Grandeville and picking out a certain section of the rock of the right color that appeared to be relatively even color. 2 blocks were quarried. Unfortunately, they dropped the second block, bringing it out of the quarry, and to keep things moving along fairly quickly, they supplied us with a replacement. The replacement piece was, shall we say, interesting. It didn't have a flat surface on it, and it gave us an awful lot of problems moving it into the cutting table.
Well, first of all, it was a pretty confined area, and we had to bring the crane in and set it up where we can get the truck and the crane there pretty close to the crane. And then we had to make sure everybody knew exactly what we're going to do. And these rocks, they weighed around 70,000 when they first came in. And we used a nylon type rigging on it so we didn't chip the rock. And we set them on railroad ties. And then the people at the Rock Mechanics had some kind of rolling system. They were going to roll them in and then cut the rocks.
The size of the piece meant that we had to build a special table for it. Nobody built one like this before, and to cope with the problems that we were going to find as we started to cut through the granite. So we built a table. We tried to be as economical as we could be, and that meant that we did, on occasion, take one or two shortcuts that in retrospect I maybe wouldn't have done, but they were part of the learning experience. Then we took Edwina's design, and we first of all cut two figures at a 12th scale. We used pieces from Alberton, Georgia for this that we had left over from cutting the original Stonehenge. And this allowed us to give her two pieces so that she could look at the original design she'd come up with, and maybe make some artistic changes if you wish. She changed the design a little bit, and then we cut two pieces at half scale. That went fairly well. We had to relearn some of the things that we'd forgotten in the 15 years since we cut Stonehenge.
Am I moving west?
Moving very smooth. Keep coming to the east.
Keep a little more.
We cut those out, and then Edwina came and looked at those shapes, and again felt there was some slight modification that we could make in the design to cut the full-scale figures.
So this is absolutely smashing.
So we went ahead and we cut out the female and the male. We separated them, which was an interesting exercise in its own right, because by now the outside weighs 10 tons, the inside weighs 5 tons, and you've got to lift the outside piece up so you can slide the inside piece out from inside.
Now they want to push it uphill. Right.
And stop.
There we are.
Whoa, Becky.
Once we got the pieces separated, we moved on to polishing. We did some preliminary experiments with the Missouri gray granite, and that polishes actually fairly easily and well. Turns out that the Missouri red is a whole lot harder to polish than the gray was. First of all, you've got to grind it all smooth. Then you start with increasingly fine layers of grinding wheels, and you grind it and then polish it.
One of the exciting things about coming here every so often, and each time there's another step has been achieved, I feel that my mind's eye is more manifest each time I get here.
Let's go to the man and start from him, because he's got some more rough edges. So let's start with him. Now we have to decide with the woman.
Okay.
Dave,
I'm here.
come right in. So getting in what's magic is setting them at right angles to each other, and having this the right distance so that somebody can walk between them. When we're coming from this direction around here, we'll see the man against that sky.
We picked this rock up, and the first ones we stood up. And after we got them both stood up, we waited for the artist to give us the okay that exactly where they wanted them placed. That's the whole thing. When you do a job and everything turns out to be 100%, you're pretty happy with it. Even though they're pushing for a deadline, people at UMR really work just like pros to get everything set in place, and we only had about 3 days to do it. And then the last rock was one of the heaviest ones that went on top. And again, we had to rig it so we could come down on the two vertical rocks with this horizontal piece. And we had to move it a couple times around just to make sure it was level and the artist was happy with how it looked. And that pretty well took care of the larger rocks. Now on the figures, it was a little bit different. We had to lay them down, and then we had to pick them with another crane because it was too far of a reach for the large crane to set them. So we used the smaller crane to turn them up and set the pieces in place. And while setting them in place, we had to set them down on rods with epoxy. And once you set them down, they pretty well had to stay there. So it had to be done one time and done right the first time. I always pointed out to different people, hey, we set them things.
In the here and now, I rather like it that they know Edwina Sandys did it, but I probably won't give a whit in the future that they know, and I don't think it would matter. I'm doing for a little pleasure now, and I hope a long pleasure for other people in the future.
Most of the work we do has a very transient life. If you work on something that helps generate a new piece of art, you're making something that can last forever, or at least hundreds and hundreds of years. And you've got a memorial that far outlives anything normal that you achieve. And that's a good feeling. Gadzooks.
In thinking about Millennium Arch, I sought inspiration from the all-time great monuments, those that are familiar to people everywhere. The pyramids, the Taj Mahal, the giants of Easter Island, Stonehenge. In Millennium Arch, the granite, only recently quarried from its billion-year-old Missouri birthplace, symbolizes for me the past. The cutouts provide space for the future, and the standing figures represent humanity. I hope that whoever walks through the Millennium Arch will feel vibrations from the past, hopes for the future, and while standing beside the polished figures of man and woman, will cherish life in time present.